Today I'm trying out the viral Ohuhu Markers for the first time and giving my thoughts on whether I think they're worth it, as well as filling in some swatches and coloring a page in my Kawaii Decora Coloring book. I was really impressed on opening this, finding out that it actually came with its own little swatch card, as well as a book that shows you all of the different markers. These are the Ohuhu series, and each marker has a chisel tip and a nib point. And as cute as that swatch page is, I'm not going to be using it because I actually made one of my own just for this. So I'm going to go through and start with our colorless blender here. I don't know why. I made a space for it, so technically I wanted to include it, but obviously it's colorless. And after that, I'm going to start with the grays, and as best as I can, try to do this in a way that makes sense, at least to me. I was really happy with the variety of grays that they had. There were both warm and cool tones. And if you have issues with shading, before you color anything at all, putting down layers of these grays can help build contrast and give you some good shading without having to worry about introducing different colors into the piece. I really need to work on shading realistically, as well as blocking colors, and I think that's something that I'm going to have fun challenging myself doing with these markers. I'm really impressed so far. They're going down really smoothly. They're drying flat. I'm not noticing any issues with it. The markers, while they are new, obviously, are still very juicy, and it is very satisfying. This marker in particular is a great reason of why I always swatch my markers before I start coloring, because it was so much darker than the cap, but I think it does dry out just a little bit lighter, which is something that I notice with a lot of markers, regardless of the brand. When it dries, it is going to be just a little bit lighter, so if it looks too dark at first, try not to freak out too much, and always remember to swatch your markers before you commit to using them on an actual piece. I can't tell you how many things I've ruined going in blind. I'm also really happy with the lineup of colors that this set has. Sometimes one of the problems that I have is that I'll get kits of markers or paint especially, and there are just so many colors, and a lot of them end up being so similar that I get them confused. Or I also just really like to mix my own colors, especially if I'm using gouache, so it's almost disappointing to have so many to choose from, and like I said, it just starts to get overwhelming after a point. So the blues that are here are really nice. I like that they transition us into the greens. There aren't as many greens, but the ones that we do have, I feel, are pretty versatile. There's a nice dark forest green, there's a true green, there's a bright green, and they can all be layered, so I'm really happy with that. At this point, it's been a few years since I've had markers to work with, so it feels really nice to just sit down and color some swatches right now. It's really satisfying, it's easy, and it's low effort, and I can appreciate that. One of the few issues that I am having is that the ink is smudging just a little bit, but in the marker's defense, this is literally cardstock that I printed this on, so I didn't have high expectations for the printer ink to hold up. I know that when I'm going to be using these in my sketchbook, I'm going to have different materials, so I'm not really worried about the ink smudging like that. Typically, I use Kuretake brush pens or Micron pens. Those are my go-tos when working with alcohol-based markers. I really like doing character illustrations when I'm working with markers, especially. I have such a huge admiration for people that do detailed landscapes and abstract scenes with markers, but that's just not for me, unfortunately. I will say I am slightly disappointed by the lack of a true red in this set. There's like a darker burgundy and like a brick red, but there's no true red, which isn't that big of a deal. It's not like a make or break sort of thing, and I'll live, but it's still disappointing. I like my vivid, juicy colors. And what do you mean you're gonna give me 8 blues and not a single true red? This is the closest we got, and it's very purpley. I was really happy with the variety of pinks and purples, though. Whenever I'm doing art, a lot of my art has purples, pinks, blues, so this kit is kind of perfect for me, even though I just dissed it for having so many blues, but it's gonna work out just fine. I've made it down to the last row, And I'm not happy with the color placement on this row because there were a couple of stragglers that just didn't feel like they belonged anywhere else, and that part is frustrating, but otherwise, this has been a really smooth process. I haven't had any issues with the markers. There are none that are leaking, there are none that are dry. There's a really nice range of colors. They all dried really nice and flat and smooth and even, and all of the other positive attributes that I look for when I'm looking for a marker. I also like the shape of these because they feel like the Copics almost, where they're kind of oval, which is going to help keep them from rolling as much. I say as they roll. That was funny timing, sorry. I had to laugh at myself for a second there. I am really happy with these, and I'm really excited to go ahead and start coloring my piece when I'm done with these swatches. I did go ahead and fill out the mini swatch card so I could keep it in there too. I'm going to take a page from my Kawaii Decora Coloring book. I have 2 pieces of printer paper that were from the back of the coloring book in there, as well as that clear piece. Now, my initial thoughts using that plastic piece is that I'm worried about accidentally making ridges by coloring over it, but we'll get to that later. Already off the bat here, I'm so happy. I have so much control with the large chisel nib. I'm able to go around all of the really small details really finely, as well as color in huge spaces so evenly and so quickly. It is super satisfying. So far, there's no issues with streaking, there's no issues with the ink smearing, and it's also not eating up the paper like some do. So that's not only a win for the markers, but also a win for the coloring book I made. As soon as I got that skin tone laid down, I went in with a slightly darker brown color and started adding some shading. I wasn't worried about making it look like realistic lighting. I just wanted the features to pop, so I'm basically just going around and adding shading around all of the little features, and then going back in with a lighter color and essentially scribbling back over it. And you can see basically right away, it blends out really nicely, and I'm really impressed with this. It helps to work in small sections whenever you're working with markers, so I try not to lay down too much at once because I don't want the ink to be fully dry before I start blending it, because that's when you start getting streaks and splotches. However, I even noticed that when I was going through over and over and over, because I cannot tell you how many times I layered these pens, it still wasn't getting splotchy, and that's a huge win for me. I went ahead and colored the hand, and I didn't record the full process of finishing the skin just because it took so long. If you want to see a full speed paint, though, of me just going through and coloring an entire page start to finish, let me know. I am more than happy to do that. It would be so much fun. But until then, I'm just going to finish up with this little arm before I move on to the next part. I went in with a really light pink and just scribbled a little bit. I wasn't worried about it being super even. And then I took the lighter skin tone that I started with to blend it back out. It gives her a nice little pop of color and just brings some more life into the piece. I also used the same tone for the blush for some eyeshadow and the lips, and I even went in later with a darker pink to add just a little bit more contrast to that subtle makeup. When I was choosing a piece to color, I was torn between this one and another one, but I thought, nah, the other one looked a little too much like Hatsune Miku, and that wasn't what I was going for the vibes of this video. And then I ended up basically choosing the perfect Miku blue for the hair, so it was meant to be, whatever. I'm in love with these chisel tips. I cannot praise them enough. I know that a lot of people prefer brush markers. I don't blame you, I do too. But I'm still really happy and really impressed with these. Me stopping there was literally me going, wow, that's satisfying. And then continuing. But it's just impressive that I'm able to get into such small details without having to worry about going out of the lines or losing control of the marker and turning it the wrong way, and all of a sudden, oh no, it's ruined. I will say there were a couple of points when I was doing this where I noticed the ink was basically pooling on the page. And we'll get to that in a little bit. I was so excited to start shading darker. I'm not gonna lie, the shading turned out kinda meh on the hair, but it started out really strong, okay? Just know that it started out really strong, as you can see here. They blend out so nice. I'm just layering the light and dark back on top of each other, back and forth, and that's really all that it is so many layers. And there I was just adjusting that little clear piece to make sure that it was under it, because I really didn't want to accidentally go through to the page below. And I'm so happy with how this is turning out so far, but it's not over yet.
Hair's barely halfway done.
I also want to give props to myself for how I illustrated this, because it's simple enough that I can do it in one sitting, but it's also detailed enough to keep me interested and keep things fun. Now, when I was done with the hair, I started on the clothes, and it was kind of hard coloring in the crook of the book like that, so my lines get a little bit janky coming up here in a second, but this pink was so satisfying to lay down. And I went through with a purple-ish color, I don't remember which one it was, and just added lines so it kind of looked like fishnets on top of the pink. I don't know, it was either that or stripes, and I didn't feel like doing stripes again because I do so many of them. So I just added more crisscrosses. And then this is one of my biggest mistakes. I added the dark purple, and I went through with lighter purple, and I tried to blend it out, but I layered it too much, and the ink pooled underneath and then started to seep out. So this is me trying to save it, and the problem that I was having is that when I layered that, the ink was literally pooling on the plastic sheet underneath it, so when I colored or moved it, it would basically reactivate and then stain the paper above it, and it was just really frustrating. So I don't think I'm going to be using that a whole lot, at least not for its intended purpose of coloring books. I think I could still get away with it just fine in a sketchbook. It's honestly probably just because of how thin this paper is, and you know what? It can't all be winners. This was a winner, though. Oh my goodness. This was so satisfying, and it turned out so good and took me no time at all. Like, I know I'm just scribbling here, but when it dries down so even, and I'm even able to go in and layer it a little bit more to add a little bit more depth to those shadows and the wrinkles. And at this point, all that's left for me to do are the little tiny details, and that pretty much finishes the piece up. Like I've said a couple times now, I'm really impressed with these markers. I think that they're high quality, I think they're worth the price, and I think they're worth the hype, to be honest. It's really nice for Copic to have another competitor in the market, because for a while your options were Copic or Prismacolors. If you wanted to get fancy, you might be able to get some Winsor & Newton. You definitely don't want the Artist Loft ones, though. Those are my least favorite alcohol markers in existence. So I was really happy to find out that these are worth the excitement. I think that they're good quality markers, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I really appreciate you for watching this video. And if you liked it, go ahead and leave a like and click the subscribe button while you're at it. It's the easiest way to help my channel grow. I really appreciate everybody that watches my videos, and especially all the people that leave comments too. I couldn't do this without you guys, so again, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.